Mary and particularly Alfie over there for inviting us today to come and talk to you. I'm not a polished public speaker, but I take heart from Kathleen's session this morning. And I'm certainly passionate about what I do and what we all do. So really the purpose of today is to tell you a little bit about what the Citizens Advice Bureau does, what the particular problems that the clients that we see, the people that we see, are experiencing at the moment in the current economic climate, what we're doing about it. Can't you? Sorry, I'll come a bit closer because my voice isn't very loud. So. Sorry. Turn it down. To tell you a little bit about what we do as the Citizens Advice Bureau, particularly the problems that the people that we are helping at the moment are experiencing in the current economic climate, what we're doing about that, and hopefully maybe what we can do in partnership to support that. So to start off with, just wanted to say a little bit about Citizens Advice generally. It's an organisation that's been in existence for 75 years next year. We've got, probably everybody recognise the logo, probably should have it on screen, but blue logo, yellow writing, very high brand recognition, as high as Coca-Cola, the pollsters tell us. But I think there's less clarity about what we actually do in practice. And certainly when surveys have been done, people's opinions vary from we're a government organisation to we're a bunch of well-meaning volunteers who are kind of like poor man's solicitors. So that's two ends of the spectrum, really. In reality, we're a network of, in England and Wales, we're a network of about 400 charities, and we're all members of Citizens Advice that provide us with information and training and so on. We're all independent. We get core funding from our local authorities. We get some funding through government contracts. We rely on charitable donations and fundraising from organisations like the Big Lottery. And yes, we do have a lot of volunteers. We started off in 1939 as a purely volunteer-run organisation. We now have more paid staff, but the backbone of our service is still volunteers. Myself and Ev and Debbie, who's here today from South Liverpool CAB, all started in the service as volunteers. And it's really been a massive thing, I mean, for our personal and career development, that we're now paid members of staff. And for a lot of people, I think the experience of volunteering with us and with other organisations is really kind of life transforming. And it's something that I'd recommend to anyone. And in many senses, what we do in terms of job creation and in terms of helping people move into the career and the job that they want to do, I think is really understated and under-recognised. And though I say it myself, I think we do a better job than the work programme a lot of the time in getting people into work. So in Liverpool, we see about 25,000 people a year in the 5 bureaus that we have in Liverpool. And they're people from all walks of life. So employed people, unemployed people, old, young, disabled. The principle is that the service is independent and that it's open to everybody. Having said that, particularly in the current economic climate, the majority of what we do, even though people come to us about any problem at all, the majority of what we do is to do with people's money. Last year, I think 50% of the inquiries that we had were about benefit issues, and 35% were about debt issues. So that's our core work, really. And you can understand how that work is burgeoning in the current circumstances that people find themselves in. I think possibly a lot of people do see us as an agency that helps with benefits and therefore helps unemployed people or people who are not in work for reasons of disability and so on. I think it's important to stress really that those problems affect people in work and out of work, and the kind of kind of difficulties that people find themselves in might be to do with the welfare reform issues where benefits have been cut. It might be to do with the fact they've been made redundant, that their hours have been cut to part-time, that they've lost rights at work, that they're on zero-hour contracts, simply that their wages are so low that they've got a heat or eat dilemma, and really need to do something about that. And I wanted to make that point because I think one of the things, and speaking personally now, and possibly not as part of the organisation, one of the things that this government's trying to do is to drive a wedge between the working poor and the non-working poor. And I think it's really important that we see that both groups of people, that all of us are kind of suffering, maybe in slightly different ways, but from the kind of programme of the austerity that is being implemented. So what I wanted to do briefly, before handing over to Ev, is just to talk about some of the major problems that people are bringing to us in the current climate. Some of the major issues that we've seen over the last 12 months. And the first thing that I wanted to start with really was the issue of welfare reform, which seems very much to be coming at us all from all angles. Sorry, we just have to have a drink of water. It's down here, it's okay. Sorry. The welfare reform, in essence, affects the working people and non-working people. Some of the biggest changes that we've seen are changes to incapacity benefits and the introduction of employment and support allowance, which has made it much more difficult to get benefits because you're not able to work. We're seeing changes coming in now to disability living allowance, which is restricting, with a new benefit replacing that called personal independence payments, which is really restricting people's access to that money that is meant to help with their care and mobility needs. It's now much more difficult to, particularly to get the mobility component of that. It's about localisation, with council tax support being funded now by local authorities and a reduction in the amount of support that's given so that more people on low incomes have to pay more towards their council tax. It's about the abolition of the social fund, which was meant to be crisis payments for people who were destitute for whatever crisis circumstances had happened to them. And the replacement of that by a much more limited scheme run by local authorities. And it's about the introduction of universal credit, which is a whole new benefit system, if that ever happens, and we're beginning to think perhaps it won't happen. And it's also about the bedroom tax, which is probably the thing that's been most in the news. But for a lot of people, all those changes are coming together to create a situation of real crisis in their lives and in their ability to kind of meet the bare essentials that they need to live. So I wanted to focus a little bit on the bedroom tax because that's one of the things that we're increasingly advising people on, certainly since April this year. We did try to do a little bit of a campaign to raise awareness of it happening before it did happen, but to be honest, when you haven't got the money to pay the rent, there's not a lot you can do anyway. I think there's about 10,000 people in Liverpool affected by the bedroom tax, which means that if they're on a low income and they're getting any help at all towards their housing benefit, if they're thought to have too many bedrooms, they can be losing anything between £14 and £25 a week. And on a low income, it's a lot of money. So just two examples of clients that we've seen who've been affected. Just an illustration of the kind of problems that people are up against. The first one is Michael, 30 years old, split up from his partner, and allocated a two-bedroom flat, specifically so he could have his children to stay with him at weekends because he had a contact order through the courts. He's lost his job, he's unemployed, currently on £71 a week job seekers allowance. 2 bedrooms. Because his children don't live with him full time, he's deemed as having one too many bedroom. He's got to pay 20% of his income towards the rent. His options really are to move to a 1-bedroom flat if there are any, and then share a room with his young daughters at the weekend. Stop having his children to stay, or face eviction. And we are increasingly now that the tax has been, I think we're meant to call it a spare room subsidy, but now that the tax has been in implementation for 6 months, we're now seeing an increasing number of people coming in with notices to seek possession from their landlords, solely because of the arrears from the bedroom tax. In terms of what we can do about it, it's we can help people apply for discretionary housing payments, and we do a lot of that. That's a lot of the work that we do at the moment, which is temporary 3-month payments from the local authority to kind of tide you over. The problem with that fund is that it's minuscule compared to the actual demand on it, and I think Liverpool are going to run out of money fairly soon on that fund, so that's time limited. We can kind of help give people some sort of money management advice, and certainly in terms of prioritising payments, sort of pay your priority things like your rent rather than credit cards, etc., etc. But again, that is quite limited. Or we can do a bit of campaigning work around it, collect that evidence, and Ed will talk a little bit about that side of our work later on. So that's just one of the problems that people who come in to see us are facing at the moment in terms of welfare reform. The other real big one is the question of the employment and support allowance, and again, that's something that's been in the news, I think, a lot because of the quality, essentially, of the medical assessments that are being used to assess whether somebody's fit for work or not, particularly where people have got mental health issues, and the kind of woefully inadequate training and the staff in Atos that do the medical assessments have, and the targets that they're set mean that an awful lot of people are being taken off a benefit when they're patently unable to work. So an awful lot of what we do is help people challenge those decisions. But one example of, I'm trying to rush through this a bit, but one example is a client who'd had severe mental health problems and had actually been on incapacity benefits initially from about 2002, something like that. It was being moved to the employment and support allowance and had to go for a medical. Filled in the form, went for a medical. Because of his mental health problems, he found it very, very difficult to explain his situation to the assessor, and he was found fit for work with a score of 0 points. He needed to get 15 points to be found incapable of work. So no points at all. We helped that client put in an appeal about that decision. It took 8 months for that case to come to an appeal hearing because there's such a big backlog of people waiting for their appeals to be heard. Managed to get medical evidence to support the client's assertions about their condition, and the tribunal looked at his case and awarded him a total of 57 points, which meant that he went into the support group and didn't have to fulfil any work-related conditions, and his benefit went back up by £34 a week, but he had to wait 8 months for that to happen. And I wanted to mention that case in particular because it's just one example of many, many appeal cases that we did last year, which we're actually no longer able to do because we've lost the legal aid funding that was previously available to help people with welfare benefits and debt issues to take forward their specialist cases. And that's been a major blow to our ability to kind of meet the demands that are coming through. It's no surprise really, given the difficulties with people's income being cut through benefits, through low wages, through part-time work, through 0-hour contracts, that more and more people are turning to payday loans and that's another thing that's been substantially in the news. And I think there's a school of thought that thinks, well, are people stupid, or what? Why are they taking out these loans? They know that it's 1,000% interest. What are they doing? Why do they need this money to fritter away? And actually, the reality is very, very different. These are some quotes from two clients who found themselves caught up in the kind of syndrome of payday loans, the kind of vicious cycle. This is Dave. I've just about paid off my payday loan, but in order to pay my other loan and my overdraft fees, I've had to take out another payday loan, so I don't default on those payments, and so the cycle continues. I can't find a way out of it, and it's not through laziness, as I work 2 jobs and a minimum of 11 hours a day, normally. I can't remember when I last had a day off. And another one, I've been struggling to pay the repayments because I've become unemployed. I've just found a job, and my first wage has been paid into my bank today. By 12:15 a.m. this morning, my account had been raided, and the payday loan company had taken £200 on a continuous payment authority. I've got £1.17 left to last till next week. It costs me £30 a week in travel expenses to get to work, which is 15 miles away. I won't be able to go to work next week, and I'll lose my job. And one of the big things about payday loans is the requirement that you grant a continuous payment authority to the loan company, which is more than a direct debit and allows them to access your account. And one of the things that we can do is to advise people how they can stop those continuous payments authorities, because there's misconceptions amongst banks as well that they can't be stopped. In fact, they can be stopped, and that's a really important way that we can get people out of this cycle. Again, we can help people to prioritise their expenditure, and we can help negotiate with companies to try and get realistic, affordable payments to pay off the debt. I think one of the things that people find particularly pernicious about the payday loan companies is the way that they harass people through text messages, voicemail messages, continually to try and ensure payment. Hopefully, there is a way out in the sense of kind of negotiating affordable payments. But again, it's something that we want to do more work in trying to prevent it happening. And the campaigning work that Ev's going to talk about will highlight some of that. The third thing that I just wanted to mention that we've seen a massive increase in, I think 60% increase in our bureau in North Liverpool in the past 12 months, is the number of people who are coming in to our emergency drop-in sessions because they've got bailiffs at the door. Now, sometimes it's council tax bailiffs. More often than not, it's magistrates' court bailiffs that actually have more powers than council tax bailiffs, and it's to do with unpaid fines. And shockingly, when we did a survey of the clients that we'd seen, half of those unpaid fines that they'd come in about were for not having a television licence. So, because people can't afford a television licence, they're getting to a point where they're then punished by a £70–80 fine, which for whatever reason they don't pay. And we do campaign to try and get people to understand the importance of paying fines. For whatever reason they can't pay, they're then fined. They've got bailiffs at the door, and the fine has gone up by another £400 to cover the bailiff fees. And again, it's a vicious cycle. Just a quick example, if I just go back to Michael again, I was talking about before, as well as being affected by the bedroom tax, he actually initially attended the bureau because he'd been fined for not having a TV licence. When he moved into his flat, he knew he needed a TV licence. He'd started paying a weekly payment, which you can do, but the requirement is that you pay for the licence in the first 6 months, which is works out about £6 a week. The licence itself, if he bought it outright, would be 2 weeks of his dole money, so he couldn't do that. So he would have been spending almost 10% of his income on his weekly payment, and inevitably he fell into arrears. Ended up with a fine, which going to court because he thought, first of all, the court hearing was in Chester. Secondly, he thought, I can't pay this anyway. Tried to ignore it. Next thing is he's got bailiffs at the door. And ironically, he still hasn't got a television licence. And that's just kind of typical of a lot of the clients that we see who are kind of struggling to juggle those payments. I mean, in that case, again, what we can do in that sort of situation is essentially, if the client has any kind of vulnerability, we can at least negotiate with the bailiffs so that they're not demanding immediate payment and they have a longer period to pay the exorbitant, what was now become an exorbitant fine. On some occasions, if we look at the process that's been gone through, it might be that the court or the court fines office hasn't followed the correct procedure, and we might be able to get the fine remitted to the court so that an arrangement to pay can be made at the court. But again, for a lot of people, it means that they do have to pay that money, and that's another reason why people get into debt with payday loan companies. And one thing that we do try and do is try and link people with credit unions where we can. And certainly some of the credit unions have helping hand funds, which are emergency loans, at a slightly higher rate of interest than you pay if you were a credit union member saving with them, but nevertheless much safer than a payday loan. And for a lot of people, that's the best way out, and hopefully the contact with the credit union will also help them to start saving for meeting liabilities in the future. But again, a lot of what we're doing is awareness work in terms of trying to change the practice of bailiffs and court collection offices to try and make things easier for people. I think I just wanted to conclude by sort of saying that I've been doing this work a long time, since since the late 1980s and into the early 90s, and I don't think it's not since kind of maybe 2008, 2009 that I realised how much progress we'd made really as a city in terms of at least challenging some inequalities and eradicating some poverty, and generally people's living standards gradually improving. I mean, it wasn't until the credit crunch and this government's response to the economic situation that I realised that kind of we had come a long way, and unfortunately we're now kind of returning, I think, to greater financial and social exclusion. And I think overlaid with that as well, and which is important in terms of people's access to the benefit system, is digital exclusion. You know, that so many claims now have to be made online, that you need a mobile phone, you need a telephone to contact this, that and the other. So in a sense, people's problems are being compounded by that digital divide between the people who've kind of got that online access and those that haven't. And I suppose the final example of things that have increased that we've been dealing with over the last 2 years, 12 months, really has been giving out food bank vouchers. And I know we've got a food bank speaker, so I don't want to say too much about that, but I mean, it's ironic that the thing that seems to be booming is the food banks. And just we as an organisation, just in North Liverpool CAB, we give out 60 or 70 food bank vouchers a month, and we're just one of many organisations in the north of the city doing that, and it's replicated in the rest of the city, in other towns and cities across the country. And it is really very depressing. Just some of the examples of why people we keep a record. We keep a record of why we give food bank vouchers out, and we do try and help people with the underlying problem that means they require a voucher. But sometimes you just think they just need a voucher because they're just not managing. Unemployment benefit, JSA sanctions is one of the major things, and we've seen more and more of them as it becomes more stringent. The requirements for seeking clients struggling financially due to debts and a benefit sanction. Loan shark taking all clients' money from him yesterday, left him with no money for food. Delaying clients' claim for JSA for himself and his partner. Claim for employment support allowance, delay in processing. Sometimes it seems like we're filling in for the Department of Work and Pensions inadequacies there. And the list just goes on and on. So, in a sense, I suppose what I'm saying is that there's a lot that we can do, but there's a lot of issues that require a more systemic approach to solving. And I think Ed's going to say something about that now.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.